Are you afraid of getting feedback?
Stick right here and we'll ease your fears.
Hey, welcome to Leaders with Leverage. I am so glad you made the choice to be here today, especially today, because I have a very special guest. And I'm going to tell you right off the top, she's my oldest daughter. This is Trace Beatty. Welcome, Trace.
Thank you. I'm very
Yes.
glad to be here. I just realized as you were doing that intro, I actually have a little fidget. I know you fidget sometimes while you're in
I
meetings. So
do.
I just realized like I'm going to be more comfortable having this in my lap while we talk today.
I love that. I have mine. I have silly putty, so it's quiet. So make sure you don't make any noise. So I have
Can you
mine
hear the
too.
click?
No, so we're good.
Okay, good. We're
Okay,
good.
good, good. I'm glad we got that covered. Now everybody knows it's a little better. I want to give a little context. I didn't ask you permission to do this, but Trace is 30, and I wanted to give you that context because she's worked for three corporate environments and she currently works at Nordstrom. She does product development, no, project management around their fraud area. So she works with engineers and she works with frontline to look at the workflow around that. Is that fair? Did I do good?
Yes, it's product management. So you
Okay.
you had both of them in separate descriptions. But yes, product management within the fraud space, as you mentioned, for Nordstrom. And yes, I do get to work with a lot of our very talented tech team, software engineers in the corporation, as well as our frontline engineers across the organization.
Okay, great. And I love what one thing we're going to talk about, which you and I talk about a lot, is we have a very different relationship with feedback. And when I grew up in my corporate world, feedback was something that happened once a year and it was hard. Like I still have problems with feedback. Like I have to get in the right mindset to hear it. But you're really different. So explain to us, what is your relationship with feedback?
That's funny that you say I'm different. I feel like feedback's still hard for me too. Feedback is
Okay.
something that's never easy to take, but I am maybe more proactive in my engagement with feedback on
Hmm.
a regular basis. I have found that in my corporate career across the last 10 or so years, that getting feedback is better than not getting feedback. And
Yeah.
even if it's very simply something along the lines of, hey, you're doing what you're supposed to be doing, and getting that feedback is very tangible and helpful for me too.
Yeah, because it's like, when I've talked to you, it's like when you are in an environment where you're not getting feedback, it's like you're in the dark. You don't know if you're doing well, if you're on the right course. And so it makes you tread water sometimes. That's what I've noticed about you is you're just not really sure or confident because you're not sure if you're going the right way even. Would you say that's fair?
Oh, absolutely. The times where you've seen me be my least confident self in the workplace has been when I've truly been in the dark about feedback. I'm getting zero. I'm not getting even negative feedback that's giving me that lack of confidence. I'm getting no feedback altogether. I don't even know. I feel like I'm wandering in the desert. I'm wandering in the darkness. I don't know if I'm going in the right direction at all. I could be walking south when I'm supposed to be walking north.
And so feedback is illustrating that somebody cares about you and investing in you. That's how you see it. That's how you feel it, right?
Oh, absolutely. And I don't just look for feedback within my leadership. I also look for feedback within my peer space, within my partner space, within like we talked about earlier, the frontline engineer or frontline workers that I work with. I'm looking for feedback for myself and for my products across a plethora of landscapes. It's not just what we're used to, which is get feedback from your manager and that's all you get. No, I look for feedback across actually, even in my day to day life outside of work, I look for feedback from my husband, from my family, including you, from my siblings, friends. And
Mhm.
it can be more subtle than I think people realize.
Yeah, that's so true. Feedback even comes from where you're not getting invited, right? What how people interact with you. And I don't know if you've ever heard me say this, but it's like the back of your head. We know it exists. We see it in the mirror, we see it in pictures, but we can't literally go behind ourselves and experience the back of our head. We It's other data sources that fill that in. So understanding what it's like to live outside of you is a data collection. It is impossible to live outside of you. So, getting all of this feedback from a lot of different places helps you understand what it's like to live outside of you.
Yeah, absolutely. It's funny because you just used that analogy with the back of your head, but the thing that I do remember you saying very regularly in what you finally got from feedback was filling your blind spots, being
Mhm.
able to fill those places that you like you just said can't see.
Mhm.
And so the best example I've heard from you, and I'm sure you might mention this story later in our conversation, is when you got really tough 360 feedback and it revealed a few blind spots for you that you had been missing, and it really leveled you up
Yeah,
in your
it's
career.
yes. So when we come back, you and I are both going to share a story. I want you to talk about how do you get feedback from all these different places. So be thinking about that. And we'll talk more about this exploration of living outside ourselves. So stay right here. We'll be right back. It's me. Thought I'd tell you how excited I am about this collection of courses I have available. It's all around the concept of adopting a negotiator mindset. And the only way to do that is to really understand what it's like to be a negotiator so that you can practice it in your everyday. I'm excited about this project because it's going to allow people to do this on their own time and go through the course at their own pace. If you want to learn more, go to SusieTomandChuck.com. I'd love for you to check it out. We're back. So, Trace, what I'd love you to do is think about a time, and I want you to share a story that isn't from your current company. If you could maybe think about something that was prior to now, just so that, you know, maybe think about what you've learned. So, can you tell us a story that is related to your relationship with feedback?
There's so many. There's literally so many. Oh, I'm thinking that far back is always hard. Let me think. So, yeah, I mean, best stories are always tough stories. So, one of my first career interactions with feedback, like I had mentioned before, I didn't get a lot of feedback really early in my career or mid-level in my career, and I hope we can talk a little deeper about
Yeah.
maybe some tips about how we can maybe facilitate that in the future, but
Yes.
I didn't get a lot of feedback, and one of my first interactions with receiving feedback was really negative for me. It was a moment in my career that kind of changed my career and my
Mhm.
trajectory entirely.
Mhm.
So I was up for my annual review one day. I think it was the next day. And the evening before my annual review, I received an email. And why I was checking my email, I don't know. Don't ask me. I'm pretty good about that now. I received an email and read it the night before, almost a blessing in disguise that I did because I had time to prepare for it and immediately called my mother when I received this email. I read the email. It was a almost a laundry list or what felt like a laundry list to me of negative, not so good feedback that I had not received previously. I thought I was going in the right direction in my role. And in that moment, all at once was compounded with the notion of, nope, you're going in the complete wrong direction. You should have been going in this direction and you've been way off course. And it hit me really hard. It was very hard feedback to take. I believe, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, Mom. I believe I called you crying. I was very
Mhm.
upset and
Yep.
emotional for many reasons, not just sad to hear negative feedback about myself, but also frustrated that I hadn't received this feedback previously.
Yeah.
And whether receiving that feedback was necessary or not, which maybe it was, I at the end of the day don't believe it was the right way to have presented that information to anyone. So
Yeah.
what I've taken from that experience, and to be a little transparent, that annual review obviously didn't go very well, but I was prepared for it. So having the
Mhm.
feedback ahead of time was helpful in some
Mhm.
regards, but I was prepared to have that more not frustrating, that conversation that was a little more
Mhm.
tense. I was prepared to have that conversation. I wasn't blindsided in the room at least.
Yeah.
I learned that as I grew up into leadership roles throughout my career and have grown into a leader, I don't want to ever do that to someone else.
Mhm.
I want to make sure that I am giving feedback well
Mhm.
as and also receiving it well. That feedback can be hard to hear, and it might have been legitimate and things I needed to
Mhm.
hear, but receiving it all at once was very difficult, near
Mhm.
impossible for me to digest.
Mhm.
And I think a better way to have done that is to give it over time, one or two pieces of feedback at a time, sprinkling in something that that person is doing well so that they can have confidence that there is the ability for them to do well and they're not just crushed by not doing well. And then
Mhm.
also getting it often, giving it often, getting it often, having that be something that you talk about on a more regular basis instead of that scenario where it seemingly wasn't even once a year, it was once every 3 years because I hadn't received feedback before that
That's
point.
so crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah. I remember that. I'm glad you told that story because I remember it so vividly because of the emotions involved. And I personally was mad. And I realized in that moment, because I had context to your leaders and how they led. And I think what had happened was they were great technical people that were put in manager roles, this specific person, and they'd never gotten any leadership training or development around that, but that's no excuse. And for me, I think that person had a hard relationship with feedback, and so they didn't wanna give you the negative feedback even in person. So it was the lazy, easy way out for him to email that. And I remember what he said to you in the moment was like, that way we could talk about all the good things, because he got that out of the way.
That's
I was
right.
just like, that
Oh,
was
I forgot
so
about that.
yeah. So was he transparently said, "This is easier for me." But
Yeah.
the other side, that's why I love you telling this story is don't forget there's somebody on the other side of getting that feedback, and it's so important that we not only think about our relationship with it, but how that transcends to the person in front of us.
Definitely. It's funny. I think around the same time in my career, I was going through a really great tactical book around leadership called The Leadership Contract. And there's a very large section around getting and giving feedback.
Mhm.
And I do remember some of my emotions that came out were frustration because I knew this was the wrong way to give
Yeah.
feedback. It wasn't an effective way. And I was almost angered and frustrated by knowing that this is not an effective way, and it was just written and I read through it in the book. This is not an effective way to give feedback. You should give feedback in much smaller increments. So I
Yeah.
wonder if that brought out even more emotion in the moment while it was happening.
Yes, because she wanted to, like, send the book to him and be like, "You're doing this all wrong." That's what I wanted to do too. I was like, "Can I have his phone number? I wanna call him and say, 'This is wrong. You're not being a good
Yes.
leader.'" But it's so interesting because we can't always have that conversation with the person in front of us, but be thoughtful about how you're giving feedback. That's the lesson here. I know that
Yeah.
you have a lot of tips. I think where do you wanna when we come back, you're gonna give some tips and from what context? Give us that context in terms of
Yeah.
how to
Yeah, I think receiving feedback is something that's really hard for me even, but a lot of people in general, and how to solicit feedback in a way where you can ultimately receive it well.
Yep.
I think there are some things that I've learned along the way that I can share.
Okay, good. I think that's great. And to your point, feedback, we're just slicing off a piece of the feedback equation. This is something that you don't just overnight get good at, but there's also a great book called Thanks for the Feedback that is really good about looking at it from all dimensions. But yes, Trace is going to take it from the perspective of being the receiver. So stay right here and we'll have Trace's tips in just a minute. Hey, Susie here. Thought I'd pop in. I wanted to let you know I've been an executive coach for over a decade. I work with executives and they call me their silent partner because I help them increase their confidence when they're facing really difficult decisions. If you'd like to see if we're a good fit, head over to susietalmanchuck.com and fill out an application. I'd love to hear from you. Okay, Trace, I don't know your tips. I'm excited to hear them. So the way we do this, you tell a tip give us some more context, and then I'll comment as well.
Okay. I do want to say I have not prepared these in advance. These are kind of coming more naturally. So
Okay.
bear with
That's
me.
okay.
The first one that I want to start with, my first tip is ask. What I mean by that is there are a lot of situations that you're in where you're interacting with people one on a regular occurrence. I have probably 5 or 6 one on ones that occur on my weekly schedule. In those one-on-ones or one-on-one interactions of any kind, I would really encourage you to ask for feedback. Solicit the feedback yourself. Make someone comfortable with knowing that you want feedback. It'll make them think about it. Even if they don't have any the first time, if you continually ask for it, they will eventually have something to give you. And it can be positive, it can be negative, but they know that you're ready to receive it because you're regularly asking for it.
Such a great tip. You know, your former mentor, Sarah, would always say she'd ask the same question of her, whoever she's meeting, and then they'd eventually get used to the fact that they have to eventually answer it. So asking for feedback and making it comfortable can help their side as well. I love that tip, asking for it. And even, they say in the research, if you ask for in the moment, some people will just give you accolades. But if you ask them for meaningful feedback or ask for it on a regular basis, then they'll spot it. You're giving them the opportunity to observe it so that they can give you really good feedback. That's a good one. Ask. All right. What's your
So
second one?
that's very funny because you transitioned me very
Oh,
well into the
okay,
second
good.
one.
Okay.
Yes. It's be specific. Ask specific questions about feedback that you're most interested in getting. My 2 favorite questions to ask are, where am I showing up? And where do I need to lean in more? And those are
Mm.
pretty generic. It can be specifically around a project that you're working on. How am I performing on this project? Is there anything I'm missing? Do I have any blind spots in this area, in this specific area? Being specific with the feedback that you're soliciting can also help trigger that individual to think about it and have something more tangible to give you.
Do you ever ask for that beforehand, or do you always ask consistently? Like, what is that tip around getting that I didn't say it right.
Specificity. I don't know that
Specificity.
I
Thank you.
I don't know that I ask for specific things regularly.
Okay.
I think what I do is I ask if you have feedback generically regularly. That's more of my
Mhm.
asking on a regular cadence. When I'm asking for something very specific, I will usually prepare that person because I want to enter that conversation with them having thoughtful answers for me and not just blindsiding them and saying, "Hey, can you think in the next 30 seconds about how you feel about me in this scenario?" At the very worst case scenario, if it just comes to mind where I'm realizing, oh, I have a gap here, or maybe I want to understand this about myself better, I might say, hey, in our next one on one, could I have you think about this specific piece of feedback? How am I showing up for this project? When I get specific, I usually am preparing that individual in some capacity.
Love it. That's so good. All right. What's your third tip? Can you think of one more?
Yes, yes. I don't have it like a snappy little phrase for it. What it really comes down to, though, is maybe it's pause. Maybe it's pause. And what I mean by that is, in some cases and in a lot of cases, the feedback people go to is what's nagging them, what's bugging them about you, not necessarily where you're doing well.
Mm.
And so anticipating that when you're asking for feedback, you can and will get something that will be received more negatively. If you're able to pause in the entirety of that conversation, you will be better off, even if it's killing you inside, to
Hmm.
be able to download that information and absorb it and understand it for yourself before responding.
Mhm.
When we react to feedback, that, especially if it's a negative reaction, that will immediately cut someone off from wanting to give it to you. And so you're cutting off that lifeline, that willingness to provide you with feedback if you're unwilling to stop and take the information that they're giving you, no matter how hard it is or incorrect it is. They might not have the right context, but absorb it before you try to dispute it,
Oh,
even internally.
yes, that's so good. I love the power of the pause. I think that's perfect
No,
because
that's right. That's yours.
no, I think I stole that from somebody, but like taking the time to, because you're right, it turns people off. And we all know people when we give them advice or feedback and they never take it. I don't want to, I don't give it to them anymore if they can't understand it. So if you
Yeah.
signal to them that you're not, and so I love that pause because that will be like, you're thinking about it. At least you're contemplating it. Even if in your head you're like, ooh, I'm so mad at you for saying that. That
You're
pause.
wrong.
Yeah, yeah, you're wrong. All right, so your tips were, now I'm not gonna remember. Your tips were, let's see if I can do it. Your tips were to prepare. Was it prepare? Prepare?
Be specific.
No, no, I thought that was the second one.
It was, but you
Okay.
forgot the first one. Ask.
Okay, okay, let's start again. She'll edit this in. Okay, so your tips were ask, be specific, and pause. Those are good. I'm really proud. I'm having a really proud mom moment. So good.
Thanks.
So as you know, it's not just about getting advice, it's about putting it into practice. And when we come back, I want you and I both to commit to stop, start, or continue something because listeners have to do that too. So we'll be right back. Hi, Susie here. One of the things that I love is I facilitate team conversations, whether it's talking about high stakes, how to advocate for one another. So if you're a leader and you want to bring your team together, you want to level them up, help them really bond together and increase their confidence as a whole, contact me. Go to SusieTomachuk.com, tell me a little bit about your team, and I'll be in touch. Okay, our final segment, you won't be surprised, Trace. This is where we put the pedal to the metal, the rubber to the road is you can't just talk about it. What are you going to do? And you've made me really think about, I'm going to do start actually. I'm going to start soliciting feedback from my clients. I've never really thought about how I need to get that so that I can understand what it's like to work with me. So I'm going to do that on a more regular basis. So what are you going to commit to here?
I think I'll continue my path of asking for feedback regularly. That's been a very effective way for me to fill the void of not getting feedback.
Mm-hmm.
And I really feel like it's helped me build stronger relationships in my working environment. I think I'll also start soliciting feedback from individuals that maybe I'm less comfortable soliciting feedback from, those who I might get feedback from and think, "Oh, that's not true," or "There's an inaccuracy
Mm-hmm.
there." So getting that feedback from that individual is helpful for me to better understand and comprehend, one, where they're coming from, but also how I can better work with them. Maybe their perception of me is wrong, so I need to shift that. Maybe something I'm
Mm.
doing is frustrating them, and I need to be aware of that frustrating component and how I can frame it differently, even if I need to continue to do it in some capacity, frame it differently to be a better partner to that individual.
And what that also does, it's good for your own brand, your own PR, because you're illustrating that you want to develop and you're helping them see you in the way you want them to by soliciting
Mhm.
that feedback.
Yeah, that's very true.
Gosh, I am so proud of you. There, you've given such great nuggets of advice.
Thank thank you. I joke. I have a on-call professional coach at my will, so
You do. And I have a lot of people that I want to call and give them a piece of my mind, but it is what it is. But
you can't do that for other clients, so
no, I can't do it for you either. Well, Trace Beatty, if you want people to find you, they can find you on LinkedIn, right? Connect with
absolutely.
you and tell
Yes.
tell tell Trace what kind of feedback you want from her. You can reach out to her. So thank you for being here, Trace. I know that you might have felt obligated, but I think you gave us a lot of wisdom today. I appreciate it.
No obligation,
Okay.
not in the slightest.
We're going to put what was the name of the book you mentioned?
The leadership contract.
Okay. We'll put that in the show notes along with thanks for the feedback is the one that I love as well. So feedback is something that you have to you build a relationship with, and it's a journey not a destination. And just like negotiation, it's more than a skill, it's a mindset. Thanks for being here. Until next time.